I have someone else next to me. And of course, I want to talk with the second laureate as well now live. And Agnieszka Holland received it for the Green Border and for her courage throughout whole her career. But Plus 972 magazine received also yesterday this exceptional prize. Could you please tell the audience what is Plus 972 magazine and why is it so special?
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And just like last night, I just feel a bit unconfident to speak after Miss Holland. Last night she had a great speech, very inspiring one, and mine was okay. And I hope that now I'll be also okay. She won for her amazing work. We won, I received the honorary title on behalf of Plus 972 magazine for the work of many, many, many people. I'm only one of them. And Plus 972 magazine was founded in 2010, about 14 years ago. And we are an independent, non-profit outfit run by Palestinian and Israeli journalists. And our mission is to provide in-depth reporting, investigations, analysis, and opinions from the ground in Israel-Palestine, and a bit beyond sometimes on issues to do with Israel-Palestine. We have writers from all across Israel-Palestine, but also from the States, Europe, and also our wider region in the Middle East on issues related to Israel-Palestine. We are a very small binational team with a great impact, we believe. And we're all united in our values of equity, justice, and the freedom of information. We have a huge number of contributors, journalists, scholars, analysts, writers who enrich our pages every single day. Our journalism model at 972 is very unique. We don't pretend to be objective. We even believe that this does not exist. Objectivity in journalism is passé. But we're committed to accuracy, and we try as much as we can to spotlight the people and the communities working to oppose occupation and apartheid, and that showcases perspectives that are often overlooked by, overlooked or marginalized by the mainstream narratives. We push back against harmful narratives. We explain the power dynamics in Israel-Palestine. We also shed light on the complexity of life and politics in Israel-Palestine, and we are obsessed with the context.
Thank you. Thank you. You constantly say like Palestine and Israel, and this is the reason why the magazine's name Plus 972. That's because this is the mobile phone or the phone code for both sides.
It's basically the country code for Israel now. It works for Palestine as well, but back in 2010, when the first group founded Plus 972, that was the country code for both. But still, if you use 970 or 972, if you use 972, you will reach mainly Israeli numbers, but to reach Palestinian numbers, you can use both. On this point, it's just a telecommunication question or matter, because the telecommunication sector in Israel is very advanced and developed. In the occupied territories, whether the West Bank or Gaza, it's not. They're still using G2 and G3 in some areas. And that's why many Palestinians in the West Bank, they also have Israeli mobiles, like brought from Israeli companies, because it's much more stronger network. Even in Gaza, when the telecommunication infrastructure was totally destroyed and repaired and destroyed, and there were lots of telecommunication shutdowns. The best eSIMs that worked for many weeks were the Israeli ones, because, you know, Gaza is really, really, really thin, and you can easily be almost on the border with Israel, where you have a very good telecommunication infrastructure.
Yes.
But we keep thinking whether we need to change the name. It's something, you know, we're debating.
Yeah, what's in a name? But I like the name because it shows that you want to bring things together, like the as you say, Palestine and Israel. And in our conversation we had earlier, you also stress how you would like that Israel and Palestinians, Israeli and Palestinians, or better, Jews and Palestinians, they always live together. Historically next to each other. Then history happened, and now they are like enemies, portrayed as enemies, and they are very often in hostile relationships. But this is actually the goal, I think, of the magazine and of the work you're doing, is to bring those groups together and the dream that they will be once living in peace together. And that's why you want to bring those stories in this magazine. Could you tell us, because we can't feel it, the position that this magazine has in Israel-Palestine? Is it very unique? Do people read it? Is it something that people reach to? Or is it really more a magazine that informs, is read outside the region?
So basically we are a digital magazine in English. So obviously our audience is outside of Israel-Palestine. 50% of our readers come from the States, and the other 50% from Europe and some parts of the Middle East. In Israel-Palestine, I believe we're read by, you know, journalists, diplomats, but we also have a sister partner digital magazine called Sikhami Kumit, local call, and they are Hebrew language online magazine. We translate lots of their materials. They do the same, of course, and that is the one that is reaching out to Israeli public. We are not a coexistence project. We are a binational team. And we see life in Israel-Palestine as binational one. There are about 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians living in this small piece of land. And I hope that they will stay there and hopefully live in better conditions. Mainly the Palestinians will be hopefully living in much better conditions than today. But our writers, our contributors, our team is very much united in their fight against occupation and apartheid. This is our framing. It could be complex sometimes, and we touch on these complexities, but we see that there is one regime that is controlling Israel-Palestine, one nation, one group is enjoying rights and the other is not. And the other group is divided into different groups as well, each under different conditions, under different regime, under different rules. But we think that in order to reach an everlasting, sustainable peace, you need to dismantle that regime of apartheid.
Yes, yeah. Very important. As you said, the magazine already is 14 years, and all the values you just express, I think you fight for them from the very beginning, that a magazine was established. But of course, in recent times, things got more tense, and there are now more challenges and probably more hostilities towards the magazine and your team and the team that is working there. Could you tell us more about the challenges and how life has changed for the magazine and the journalists since October?
One of the most challenging things since October 7 was, on one side, for us as a group and for the wider community of 972, which is unfortunately a small group, to hold our moral ground, and at the same time to explain and keep talking about the context. From day one, we understood how big that attack was on October 7th. But we immediately gathered, and if you read our first articles in the first couple of days, the writers made it very clear that the answer to this cannot be a war. And that was challenging. That was challenging, especially in Israel, where the media from day one, apart from being shocked, like everybody else, I think also, not only in Israel-Palestine, the media was cheering for the war. Many media outlets in Hebrew and in English, based in Israel, called this war the most justified war. And what, that was really tough to be, such a small minority, a very lonely voice. And I do believe that the discussion has shifted a little bit in some media outlets like Haaretz. The discourse has shifted a little bit, and they now have more diverse opinions about what is going on. But we were very lonely in the beginning. And explaining the context was tough. It was tough even vis-à-vis the international media, because the international media, breaking news websites, they love the Big Bang, the wars, and they can cover them without putting any context. We also believe in that context is very important, but we also enjoy the fact that we are not a breaking news website. We have time. We have time to think and edit and approach the right people to write and pick and choose between articles. It was also challenging with all the eyes on Gaza, which is very legitimate, of course. This is one of the ugliest wars of this century, with more than 35,000 people killed, 70% of them women and children. Every aspect of life has been destroyed in Gaza. It was challenging to keep an eye on the other parts of Israel-Palestine. We tried hard to keep an eye on what's happening in the West Bank, in the other parts of the occupied territories. There are many communities in certain areas in the West Bank where people were displaced, especially Bedouin communities. We also followed closely what is happening with the Palestinian citizens of Israel. From day one, students, activists were persecuted, jailed for some time. Most of them are out by now, but they were interrogated and jailed. The recent incident is a professor at the Hebrew University, Nadira Shalhoub Gofarkian, who was persecuted first and attacked by her own university, which led also to an orchestrated campaign against her by many right-wing groups, by politicians, and led eventually for her arrest. She was arrested for a few nights, and it's not over. She's being still interrogated by the police, and I don't know what will happen with that case, but we will, we kept following it up, and we will keep doing that, of course. So it was challenging to keep an eye on different areas, and not only on Gaza, but of course the biggest chunk of our reporting analysis investigative reporting was about Gaza. And the last challenging thing was working with journalists in Gaza. I said yesterday that 134 Palestinian journalists and media workers have been killed by the Israeli army since October 7th. It's important to stop on the number, because this is the number, 134, is the number of the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate. Most unions of journalists or journalist organizations are giving different numbers, which is, to us, is a bit hypocritical, we think. If there is, God forbidden, another attacks on journalists, and no matter what area in the world, they usually, these international committees to protect journalists or other usually rely on the local syndicate, on the local union, on the local committee. In our case, the Palestinian narrative, the Palestinian story is always questioned. And that's why it's very important to say that, we, for example, at 972, we unfortunately use the numbers of the, unfortunately because we don't want more journalists to be killed and attacked and silenced, but we use the numbers of the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate. And working with the journalists in Gaza was the most challenging part. Unlike many other media outlets in English, we don't collect testimonies and some information from journalists and then we edit them back in Jerusalem or London or Brussels or Berlin. We give the agency and the byline to the journalists on the ground in Gaza. If you have followed 972, we had a group of 5 excellent journalists who reported to us from the ground. Of course, we do our work as editors. We fact check and we edit. And working with them was extremely challenging, first and above because of the telecommunication shortages, and the cuts. Sometimes we will hold an article for days because we need to verify things with the journalists, but we can't get hold of them. Let alone the personal agony of waiting to hear from them, sometimes for days. And it's a bit better now because the Palestinian telecommunication companies got the chance to go and repair, so the signal is better now. But there were days where I didn't hear from them, and I was worrying about the worst news that may come. I'll never forget that for the first, I think, 3-4 months, it was like every night going to sleep, trying to go to sleep with hearing the message from them that we're still alive, and then waking up on that same message. When I text them first thing in the morning and they say, Alhamdulillah, we're still alive. And as if that is the only thing that they can say. And although, it was really challenging, and sometimes we were behind the news and we didn't get the reports out on time, but it was always very important to us to give them, for the people who are there on the ground, to give them the agency and to have their names next to the articles. Many journalists, many media outlets in the West are complaining for months now that they can't go into Gaza. There was even one incident where one very famous journalist said that there are no journalists in Gaza. Disregarding all of those who have been doing this amazing work under impossible conditions for over 7 months now. And they continue to do so. 3 of our journalists have left Gaza, but they're still reporting because they still have family and friends there, and they are still, trying to talk to them and report. They left the war, but the war is still, haunting them somehow. And that, I would say, was it was extremely difficult, but it was also inspiring, working with the journalists in Gaza.
Thank you for shedding light on for us, on what is happening. The story you just shared with us about this university professor that is imprisoned because of her views on the war, of course, when you report, and your journalist and everyone in Plus 972 magazine that is critical of the government now, and the government that is, well, not very in favor of free speech, to say the least, do you feel the tension, and are you afraid, or is there more, you know, if they can take a university professor to prison, are you afraid that you can have a knock on the door as well? And the journalist from Plus 972.
No, it's scary. The overall atmosphere is awful, and the problem is not just the overall atmosphere and the government and the politicians who are inciting, you know, day and night against, you know, Palestinian citizens in Israel. Their genocidal statements were quoted at the International Court of Justice, so I don't need to repeat them here. But the scariest thing for me as a journalist is that the Israeli media, by large, apart from few, is also recruited in the war effort. Like they in many broadcasts, in many columns, you feel that as if they're soldiers in this war and not journalists. And I think they're failing big time because they are misleading the Israeli public, not informing them about what is happening in Gaza, and that's why the Israeli public is shocked to see big demonstrations outside, in the streets of Europe, and now with the campus protests in the States, because they don't really know what is happening. And that is the scary part, that within your own community of journalists, we don't feel solidarity. There's no support. Many of us could be seen as, traitors as well. But compared to what is happening to journalists in Gaza, one cannot really think about the other dangers, because like all other dangers are considered okay. Just like what Ms. Holland said.
Yes, well, it reminded me of what she said, yes, that it's not the gulag or the camp, so it's just unpleasant, but it might become very grim, because you never know what now the government in Israel will do. And I know we have so little time, and I just would like to continue this conversation, because it really gives us an inside view from what is happening there, and how what is unfolding at the moment, how you look to it, an inside view. And that's why I ask the question. It's not because I think that you can predict the future, but I would really like, and I think many of us here today, to hear from somebody that lives in Israel and is Palestinian. How do you think that things will unfold the coming months and years? I know you can't predict, but I really would like to hear what you think that will happen.
I think that first and foremost, the war has to stop.
Yes.
Like that is the first thing that has to happen. Regarding the future, I wish I can be optimistic. I really wish I can, but I'm not. And I less care these days about how the day after will look, what sort of political structure will be put in place. But there is no doubt that, Israelis and Palestinians, Palestinians and Jews in Israel-Palestine, they must engage in a reconciliation process, and not just peace talks and negotiations. We really, really need reconciliation. And what matters more than the political structures or solution that will be found are the principles of that solution. And for me, the main principles are, first, to dismantle the apartheid system, and second, for all Jews and Palestinians in Israel-Palestine to live in equity and, you know, to have justice for all. That's what I wish for. I think it's a bit, you know, far away, or perhaps we think it's a bit far away, but we have to be like on the ground back in Israel-Palestine, working to make sure that any solution to the conflict, will respect these principles.
Yes. Well, Ghousoon, after Agnieszka Holland, you said that you feel humbled to speak after her because she's such an inspiring and exceptional woman. But I must say, you are just like her and very inspiring. And I think we could not have wished for better laureates this year and Difference Day. And I think everyone is rooting for all the values you just expressed, and that Israeli and Palestinians will be able to live in peace and equity together one day. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you do. It's so important. And we can, I think, support the magazine by Googling it, by going it, by reading it, by sharing those pieces. And I think this is what we can do. Watch the movies, read critical journalism. And thank you for being here and talking with us. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ghousoon Bisharat. Thank you, Alicja Gescinska. And thank you all for being here, for coming. The serious part of Difference Day has come to an end. I would like to invite you all to our networking drink. It's a perfect way to start the weekend, I think. So, thank you all once more, and hope to see you next year on the 3rd of May. Thank you.